The Japanese shamisen seems to be showing up everywhere lately. It sounds awesome, no doubt about that. In fact, so awesome that many people end up wanting to play. But over the past few years of doing shamisen related videos and even helping Japan's top players start an online shamisen school, I've gotten countless DMs, emails, questions, and stories of heartbreak from people who took the plunge often before knowing the stresses, risks, and costs involved. And so I wanted to give a fair heads up. So allow me to start by saying that this is not one of those do not be interested in shamisen videos. If anything, is very much the opposite. A little bit of context can go a long way in giving a lot of appreciation. And for those who are actually interested in playing or starting the shamisen, hopefully this will help get you off to a better start at a lower cost and give you a list of things that I wish I knew before I started playing the shamisen. The first one, and by far one of the most important, is that shamisen do not last forever. We're going to loop back to this one because it connects to a lot of the other points, but they are very much an expendable resource that wears down over time, and that comes in big when you're choosing what level of shamisen do you buy. Do you buy a cheap one? Do you buy an expensive one? Again, as we get into the later points, I just want you to understand right at the beginning that unlike a lot of instruments like a guitar, you don't just buy a shamisen and have it forever. In fact, in many ways, the cheaper you start, the more it can cost you in the long run, both in actual money and in time and care. And there's a lot to keep in mind there. The second point, and this is one that I get a weird number of DMs and questions about from people who have already bought their first shamisen, is why won't my shamisen stay in tune? And the short answer is they don't. Not for very long, at least, especially if you have a fresh new set of strings on your shamisen. They'll go out within moments of playing. You'll be playing and all of a sudden it will be out of tune and you've got to tune again. This is such a defining feature of the shamisen, especially the Tsugaru Shamisen, that you will often see players tuning their shamisen as they play the song. Now you can mitigate this a bit by kind of stretching out your strings at the beginning when you play, but around the time that your strings finally settle and they get to the point where they're fully stretched out, more often than not, they'll break pretty soon after that. It's not uncommon to see a shamisen player even break a string in the middle of a performance or in the middle of a competition, and if that happens, that is it. In a performance, maybe they can quickly restring and everyone's waiting and it's a little bit awkward, or they'll have a backup shamisen, but in a competition, if you break a string in the middle, you are out, and it is something that happens insanely often. Now, there are a bunch of other small factors, like making sure that you do not touch the wood on the inside here of the itomaki, the tuning pegs. That way your natural hand oils don't get in there. That will cause these itomaki to slip and go out of tune much more easily, as well as the humidity or a really dry day. Any change in that level of humidity can just make these go, and all of a sudden you're playing 1 minute and then it pops out and unravels. So making sure that you know how to hold and tune your shamisen properly will help keep it in tune just a little longer, but won't keep it there forever. Now, another one that surprises a lot of people is that a shamisen cannot just be left like a guitar. You can't just put it on a stand and leave it in your room and pick it up and play it whenever you want. The koma, the bridge here, needs to be taken out, needs to be wiped down every single time to protect it from the humidity. It needs to be placed inside of something called a washi bukuro, preferably one wrapped in plastic, then wrapped up, placed in a nagafukuro and closed up in a case. And then every single time that you want to play it, you need to pull it back out, unwrap it from all of that. All of this is to ensure that your shamisen lasts as long as possible. They are not meant to be set up and left like this for an extended period of time. Even the ones here, I had to pull them out of their cases and set them up just for this video recording. If you were to just leave your shamisen like this, you'll ruin your shamisen, is basically. Also, they need to be played non-stop. Because of the amount of natural material in a shamisen, it is much more likely to warp, or the skin is much more likely to rip. And really, that brings us to our next point, that the shamisen is very much an incredibly sensitive instrument. It doesn't really like huge changes in humidity. You should be keeping it in an environment that is around 40% humidity. I keep mine properly wrapped up in their case, and I keep those little dry packs, like a ton of those little dry packs, you know, the ones that say do not eat, all throughout my case at all times, and I try to keep my house around a solid 40% humidity as well. Huge changes in humidity can do things like rip the skin, make it much harder for it to keep in tune, or if it's left in a humid environment and not touched for too long, you can even see warping of the neck, and as soon as something like that happens, it is done. Now in the past couple years, things like worrying about your skin ripping and whatnot is slowly becoming a thing of the past as they're using less natural skins and more synthetic skin. This shamisen back here has a ripped skin, and that was the last shamisen I ever got that had a natural skin on it. Every shamisen that I have here now have synthetic skins which last a lot longer. In principle, they could last forever. Over time, the sound will decrease, the volume will decrease, it will loosen up. So it's every 5, maybe 10 years, it would still be good to replace it. But if your shamisen's skin rips due to humidity, that can cost you $300 to $500 in Japan. So if you live overseas, sending that out and getting it repaired and sent back can potentially cost you much more. In fact, costs in general are something that you should be aware of, not just for the shamisen, which we will get to, but for things like strings. The largest string here alone right now is about $10 to $15 per string. I go through about 2 to 5 of these strings in a month. So I'm looking anywhere between $20 to $50+ just for the first string every single month, as well as your butchie and plectrum, which do wear down, chip, break, all of that. Like these ones here, there are a lot of synthetic options coming out by more reputable butchie makers, which is really exciting to see. The cost is also down to about 10% of what the cost of one of the original Bldg traditional shamisen butchie would cost, so that is a huge plus, but they can still run you a pretty penny. And without the right knowledge on how to properly take care of your butchie or your shamisen, the neck, the skin, all of it, your costs can grow quite a bit, especially because the shamisen itself isn't cheap. And this is where I want to talk a little bit about the shamisen being an expendable resource. Now, first things first, no matter what cost bracket you go for, I always recommend purchasing a shamisen from a reputable Japanese dealer. I will link one in the description. They make this here, the shovel, which is a beautiful beginner shamisen, as well as this one right here, which is probably by far the best entry-level shamisen that you can get. In fact, if you want to hear and see the differences, I will link an entire video about that above as well. But if you go too cheap on shamisen, your biggest risk is that it will be made out of soft wood or hardwood that doesn't really resonate well, which means you're either going to get a bad sound, or the most likely scenario is you're going to get a shamisen that over time the neck of the shamisen wears down quite a bit. You can have it planed so that it's fresh and ready to play again, but there are only so many times that you can do that before the shamisen is completely useless. It's one of the reasons I don't recommend the lowest level shamisen, because the wood that they're made of is just too soft, and you're really only going to have that shamisen for maybe 5 to 10 years of regular practice. The ripped shamisen back here, this is my first ever shamisen. It is a low level shamisen, and within about 3 to 4 years of playing it, the neck started to really wear down, got it planed out. I think I've got about one more time that I'd be able to plane it out before it wouldn't be usable anymore, and honestly, I wish I had paid just a little bit more for a mid-level shamisen. After that, I had saved up and upgraded to this one, which is a high-level shamisen, which I have probably played 3 to 4 times the amount that I played that one. How many years have I been playing? I've been playing this number of years so far, and the neck on this still looks brand new. You wouldn't even know, other than maybe the odd dent here and there, that it was even played. This shamisen most certainly will last me my entire life. I will never need to purchase another performance level shamisen. This is the one that I use for stage performances and everything like that, and I love it, but it was not cheap. Unfortunately, it is not as simple as more expensive shamisen equals better, cheap equals bad. There are more things in there, but knowing that these type of gaps and these differences exist is a starting point that I wish I had when I first started shamisen, because a lot of people will jump in and go as cheap as possible. If you're gonna go as cheap as possible, honestly, go for one of these shabo style ones. They're still a ton of fun to play with, but if you're serious about it, I highly highly recommend checking out one like this. Again, it'll be linked down below. We've been using this one for shamisen lessons very regularly for the past couple months. It sounds great and it's still in good condition. I can see this one easily lasting 10 plus years without issue. One of our last points, and this one tends to be a really big surprise for people, is that learning to play songs on the shamisen is not like learning to play songs on the guitar. You're not gonna sit down and pick up a song in a day or a week. While you might be able to pick up the basic tune of a song within a day or a week, getting the intricacies and properly playing a song well can take you months, if not years, in order to do. In fact, the main song in Tsugaru Shamisen, called Tsugaru Shamisen, is a song that each player has their own rendition, their own version of, and spends a lifetime working on and perfecting. When we go to competitions, the Taikai, everybody gets up on stage and plays their rendition of Tsugaru Shamisen. And this brings me into the last point that I really want to make, which is nobody plays perfectly. And that's one of the other big differences between shamisen and something like a guitar, is that not only does it take longer to play the songs, but you are rarely to never get the song perfect. I liken shamisen less to a musical instrument and more to golf or bowling or something like that. Like with bowling and golf, you're not going to get a perfect score or hole-in-ones all the way through. You're aiming for perfection. You're trying to do better than you did the last game, but there's always going to be slip-ups and mess-ups along the way, and shamisen is a lot like that. The strike of the butchie, for example, with a shamisen is very similar to the approach of swinging a golf club. You don't want to squeeze it too hard. You don't want to hold it too light. There's got to be that follow through. You're using the weight of it. It is honestly, if you've ever played golf or tried bowling and gotten kind of serious at it, I would draw a very strong comparison between the swing of your arm or your golf club to the swing of the butchie and getting a feel for it. How you use this butchie contributes so much to the sound. Just by changing the angle of the butchie ever so slightly, you can completely change the sound of the song. Now, if you're interested in hearing more examples of this, I did a shamisen video maybe about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, that I will link up above, that talks about what it's like to actually play the Tsugaru Shamisen and all of the intricacies and everything like that. And come to think of it, as a bonus point, the shamisen is incredibly difficult to travel with as well. Unless you have one that breaks down into pieces, and yes, some of them break down into pieces, it's really hard to carry it in its giant case. And even if you do have one that breaks into pieces, you will get stopped a lot at the airports. Guaranteed. They want to open it up. They want to know what type of wood it's from. They want to know what the butchie is. Is this a weapon? It has to be carried on. It cannot be checked luggage. They are very easy to break, but that's also something that's usually reserved for professional players. But who knows, that might be your goal. But if you are interested in playing, I will link all the necessary information and resources in the description box below, as well as shamisen lessons by Japan's 2 top shamisen players, covering everything from those basics that you would need to properly take care of your shamisen without driving up costs, all the way up to playing techniques and phrases, songs, originals, and everything in between. In fact, if you're on the fence about playing the Tsugaru Shamisen and this video hasn't given you enough information, I would highly recommend trying out at least a month of those shamisen lessons and looking at the basics stuff, the stuff that talks about how to properly take care of the shamisen and everything that goes into shamisen ownership. A lot of people get their shamisen and then are surprised or overwhelmed by the amount of care that it takes just to own one of these. Now, as somebody who's been playing the shamisen for well over a decade and has done so professionally here in Japan, on stage, on television, and everything, I can tell you this is a journey that is very much worth it. I still play every single day and love every minute of it. It has opened up my world, and it's really like holding a mirror up to yourself. You're never ever going to be able to play anything perfectly, and because of that constant uphill struggle and the search for perfection that you know you're never going to find, you learn a lot about yourself along the way, and you bond really deeply with other shamisen players. There are great communities out there in Japanese and English. I recommend all of them. They are filled with amazing people who really really care about the instrument. I hope that this has given you either A, a starting point for your own shamisen journey, or B, enough context that the next time you hear the shamisen, you're like, wow, I didn't know that. Oh, see, look, they're tuning in the middle of the song, and you can enjoy it just a little tiny bit more. I will also link a playlist of shamisen related videos at the end of this video for anybody who is more interested, as well as my original shamisen only channel, which is literally just shamisen music at the end. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope the rest of your day is beautiful, and I will talk to you again real soon. You know what? It has been borderline painful to sit here and hold a shamisen for this entire video and not do any playing, so see, it's out of tune. I tuned it at the beginning and it is already out of tune. I wonder if this one will get me flagged. I've wanted to do a shamisen related video for so long, with all the shamisen trips that we've been doing, the ones out to Mount Fuji, the sakura on the water and everything. I am really happy that I got to do this today. For any of you who tune in for the shamisen content, I love you. I love you so much, and I'm so happy that you're here. This is what I'm in it for. This is why I live here. This is it.